Yeah, I'm so sorry. There was some technical issue. I got exited. So, once again, there was some technical issue. I got exited. Our mutual fund webinar. So every Friday we does this webinar for the mutual fund. I'm Diwakar Yadav, mutual fund product manager from HDFC Securities, and thank you all for taking out the time and joining this webinar. In today's webinar, we are going to learn about an ongoing NFO from HDFC AMC large and will continue till 4th of October. And to discuss that, today we have Mr. Shikhar with us. Shikhar works as a product specialist at HDFC Mutual Fund, specializing in ETFs and index funds. Prior to this, he worked at NFO market, thematic, smart beta, and sectorial indices. A postgraduate from London School of Economics, he also worked in London at a hedge fund and investment bank in a various macro investment research roles. So welcome, Shikhar. Shikhar, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Diwakar. So I think we can start straight away with the presentation. So today we are
Sure,
going
sure.
to be discussing the NFO of the HDFC Nifty Large Midcap 250 Index Fund, which is opened last Friday and is closing on the 4th of October, right? So what all will be discussed today, just to give you a broad overview first. So first we will discuss, what are large caps, mid caps, just a very brief introduction, and also understand that why they are distinct segments, what makes them unique in their own way, and hence why should one consider investing in both these segments. ठीक है, so पहला सेक्शन में हम ये देखेंगे. दूसरे सेक्शन में we will go through the methodology of the Nifty large mid cap 250 index. उसका and we'll get a sense कि उसमें कैसे stocks है, what kind of sectors, themes do you get exposure to, right? That's the second section. तीसरे सेक्शन में we'll go through the performance, historical performance of the large mid cap 250 index to get a sense कि क्या returns रहे हैं over various time horizons. And in the last section, we will conclude a summary, conclude, and do Q&A. ठीक है? So let's start off with what are mid caps and large caps? So, large caps are the 100 companies forming part of the Nifty 100 index. ठीक है, so पूरा universe is Nifty 500. उसमें से the largest 100 companies are in the Nifty 100 index. They are large caps. ठीक है. Next category is a mid cap. So these are the 101st to 250th companies in the universe. So these are companies which are smaller than large caps, right? तो जितने भी companies हैं mid cap 150 index में, total of 150, these are classified as mid caps for our purpose, right? So just a question of size. सबसे ज्यादा बड़े companies are large caps. उनसे एक level जो companies जो उनसे थोड़े छोटे हैं, they are called mid caps. ठीक है? Now, what are the characteristics of large caps and mid caps? Okay, so large caps, na, by and large, they tend to be the well-established businesses. So they have many decades of history. They have very long track record, and because of this, they generally tend to be little more stable and less volatile, than smaller companies. So that is a brief overview of what large caps are. And अगर अभी हम देखेंगे, right, Nifty 100 large cap index में, so there are some sectors where you get more representation than mid caps. So for example, financial services, IT, FMCG, these kind of stocks you find more in the large cap index than the mid cap index. Okay, that's large caps. On the mid cap side, as I said, कि these are slightly smaller companies. तो because ये companies थोड़े छोटे होते हैं, they also have high growth potential, right? And that is what the main investing case is for the mid cap segment. But investors को एक चीज जरूर याद रखना है कि with this higher growth potential also comes higher volatility. So growth potential भी है, there are potentially future market leaders within the mid cap space, but kabhi kabhi this segment is also quite volatile, right? एंड अगर अभी ये हम बाद में भी देखेंगे ऑन दैट रेलेवेंट स्लाइड, बट जस्ट टू गिव यू एन इंट्रोडक्शन, certain sectors like capital goods, healthcare, realty, chemicals, ये सारे सेक्टर्स ना ज्यादातर मिड कैप इंडेक्स में मिलते हैं, इनका रिप्रेजेंटेशन लार्ज कैप में इतना नहीं है, राइट? सो फ्रॉम दिस स्लाइड इट्स क्लियर कि ऐसे कोई सेक्टर्स हैं, राइट, इन द लार्ज कैप सेगमेंट लाइक फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज, आईटी, एफएमसीजी, ये ज्यादातर लार्ज कैप में मिलते हैं, मिड कैप्स में नहीं, एंड वाइस वर्सा कैप गुड्स, इंडस्ट्रियल्स, केमिकल्स, ये ज्यादातर मिड कैप इंडेक्स में मिलते हैं एंड नॉट इन लार्ज कैप. So that's why it makes sense to combine large and mid cap, because they have quite different sector exposures individually. So we'll see this in more detail, but I thought इस stage पे ही मैं आपको इस थोड़ा इस बात पे introduce कर दूं. अच्छा, next slide is quite interesting because there is a general perception, right, कि अगर कोई कंपनी लार्ज कैप है तो इट इज अ लीडर, और कॉन्वर्सली कि सारे लीडर्स आर लार्ज कैप्स. बट the point of this slide is कि actually this is not true. There are many companies in the mid cap space also which are leaders in that respective space. So for example, we've not named the companies here, but a very large tire manufacturer, battery company, FMCG and oral care, these are all companies which are actually in the mid cap space. So what happens is that when you take exposure to mid caps, you are getting exposure to companies which are leaders in a very fast growing space, right? तो जैसे ये मार्केट, मान लो टायर मार्केट, बैटरी मार्केट, ओरल केयर मार्केट, जैसे जैसे ये मीडियम साइज मार्केट्स ग्रो करेंगे, these mid caps are well positioned because they are leaders, तो उनका भी growth होगा. And as an investor in both large and mid, you will stand to benefit from this higher growth potential, right? So this is an important point. It's not that leaders are only in large caps. Leaders are very much there in the mid cap space. Often the markets that they are serving have significant room to grow, and therefore the mid cap often has more growth potential than large caps. So having a balanced, diversified portfolio of large and mid cap is sort of a good thing for investors. अच्छा, लास्ट पॉइंट कि हमें मिड और लार्ज और मिड दोनों, व्हाई इज इट पोटेंशियली गुड फॉर इन्वेस्टर्स टू टेक एक्सपोजर टू बोथ. सो इस स्लाइड में हमें ये दिख रहा है कि इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू नो इन एडवांस कि इन एनी गिवन फाइनेंशियल ईयर विच वन विल डू बेटर. सो फ्रॉम 2005 वी हैव 19 फाइनेंशियल ईयर्स, उसमें से अराउंड 8 सालों में मिड कैप इंडेक्स ने लार्ज कैप ने मिड कैप को आउट परफॉर्म किया एंड वाइस वर्सा. सो इट्स नॉट क्लियर, इट्स नॉट कंसिस्टेंट कि हमेशा लार्ज कैप मिड कैप को आउट परफॉर्म करता है एंड वाइस वर्सा. Essentially the winners keep changing. So as an investor, instead of making continuously getting maybe confused, perplexed ki, which sector should I allocate to this year because I don't know which one will go up, it's much simpler to have a balanced exposure to both, and that we'll see in the next few slides is what large mid cap index does, right? So just to summarize, large and mid caps are very sort of unique segments. They have different sector exposures, and they have different amounts of growth potential and stability, right? Leaders mid cap segment में भी होते हैं, and the winners between large and mid change quite frequently. So for all these reasons it makes sense to invest in both large and mid cap, right? That is what the points of these slide are. Now we'll see what is a sort of new and novel way to do it, which is exactly what the large mid cap 250 index does. So इसका methodology अभी मैं briefly समझा देता हूँ. It's very simple. It is essentially a combination of all the large caps and mid caps. So large cap index में 100 stock है and mid cap index में 150 stock है. So combining them, very simple. Large mid cap में 250 stocks, all large caps and all mid caps are included in this index. ठीक है? So एक ही product में आपको 250 stocks का diversified exposure मिल रहा है. Very simple. Now we'll get to the interesting point. So what is happening in this index is कि the aggregate weight of the large cap is set at 50 and mid cap is also 50. So in that's why I kept saying balanced exposure, balanced exposure. उसका ये मतलब है कि जो पूरा aggregate total weight है large caps का, वो 50% पे फिक्स किया गया है, एंड मिड कैप का भी 50% है, राइट? सो दैट मीन्स आपको एक ही प्रोडक्ट में relative stability, less volatility of large caps and growth potential of mid cap stocks मिल रहा है, राइट? एंड ये जो 50-50 वेटेज है, ये दिस इज रीसेट टू 50-50 एट द एंड ऑफ एवरी क्वार्टर, ठीक है? सो दैट इज द मेथोडोलॉजी इन अ नटशेल. अच्छा, नाउ वन वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट, राइट, कि दिस रीबैलेंसिंग मैकेनिज्म कि जिसे हर क्वार्टर के एंड पे वेट 50-50 बिटवीन लार्ज एंड मिड किया जाता है, इट्स क्वाइट बेनिफिशियल फॉर द इन्वेस्टर एंड टैक्स एफिशिएंट, राइट? सो व्हाई इज दिस द केस? सो जस्ट अज्यूम फॉर अ सेकेंड कि आप आपको ये आइडिया अच्छा लगता है कि आई वांट लार्ज मिड इन वन प्रोडक्ट, मुझे भी 50-50 वेटेज चाहिए, राइट? यू वांट दिस, बट आप कहते हो कि मैं अपने आप ही ये वेटेज से ये वेटेज में मैं इन्वेस्ट करूंगा एंड मैं खुद ही रीबैलेंसिंग करूंगा, राइट? तो यू स्टार्ट ऑफ विथ लेट्स से 50 rupees in large, 50 rupees in mid cap index, two funds you'll buy, and in let's say in a year's time or in 3 months time मिड कैप बढ़ गया आपका, ठीक है? सो अब आपके वेट्स हो गए हैं 44, 45, 55, जस्ट एज एन एग्जांपल. ओके, नाउ एज एन इन्वेस्टर, राइट, अगर आप ये रीबैलेंसिंग खुद करोगे तो दैट मीन्स यू विल हैव टू सेल सम ऑफ योर मिड कैप फंड एंड बाय द लार्ज कैप फंड, ठीक है? Two issues with this. One is कि you मतलब this is quite a inconvenient and time consuming process because you as the end investor will have to keep track of this, right? और हर investor के पास ना तो time ना तो expertise है, right? Second and more importantly, जब भी आप कोई भी आपका फंड प्रॉफिट में है और उसको आप बेचोगे, there could be a tax liability for you. So every time आप rebalance करोगे to keep that 50-50 weightage, there is a potential capital gains liability for the investor, right? But this fund, the HDFC Nifty Large Midcap 250 Index Fund, it solves this problem because यहाँ पे वो 50-50 rebalancing is happening within the scheme itself. So every quarter, the fund manager is automatically rebalancing large and mid to 50-50. एंड यहाँ पे राइट, जब लेट्स से अगर मिड कैप बड़ा है, आप फंड मैनेजर मिड कैप स्टॉक्स बेच रहे हैं और लार्ज कैप खरीद रहे हैं, एज लॉन्ग एज इट हैपेंस एट द फंड लेवल, देयर इज नो टैक्स लायबिलिटी फॉर द इन्वेस्टर. यस, जब आप फंड को रिडीम करोगे कभी भी 5 years, 10 years, 20 years डाउन द लाइन, तब रिडेम्पशन पे टैक्स देना पड़ेगा. बट एवरी सिंगल रीबैलेंस, राइट, जो विच इज हैपनिंग एवरी क्वार्टर, उस पे इन्वेस्टर को कोई या फंड को कोई टैक्स नहीं देना पड़ता है. So that's why if you believe in this long term allocation of 50-50, आपको ये पसंद है कि कि large cap mid cap 50-50 balance allocation मिल रहा है, this is a very simple product for you because ये rebalancing is automatic, and as a normal investor, rebalancing does not have any tax liability. So if you just sort of hold this product for the long term, fund manager is doing the rebalancing for you, and you are getting this 50-50 allocation in a very tax efficient manner, right? So this is a very important point that I wanted to highlight here. Okay, now let's see a little bit more about what kind of stocks and sectors you are getting exposure to. So by and large आप देख रहे हो कि large caps, many of the recognizable names are in the top 10. I think इससे ज़्यादा interesting is the sector breakup, and not only sector, you will also see यहाँ पे आपको काफी themes का भी exposure मिल रहा है. So before I explain this slide in detail, I want to make one additional point, and that is कि in the last 4 or 5 years, since 2020, right, one big change in the Indian economy has been कि the growth has broadened out. तो पहले in the 2010s आपका कंजम्पशन और आपका सर्विसेज इकोनॉमी, दैट वाज वेयर द ग्रोथ वाज. बट अभी अगर आप देखोगे, कंजम्पशन सर्विसेज अभी भी चल रहे हैं, बट वेरी इंपॉर्टेंटली मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एंड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, सो गवर्नमेंट कैपेक्स, प्राइवेट कैपेक्स, ये सारे थीम्स भी चल रहे हैं, राइट? सो इट्स अ वेरी ब्रॉड बेस्ड ग्रोथ that India has been experiencing in the last in this decade, and hopefully these drivers are going to be present for many years and decades to come, right? So as an investor, you sort of want a very broad diversified product, ताकि आपको सारे सेक्टर सारे थीम्स का एक्सपोजर मिलेगा, right? And that is exactly what large mid cap 250 index is giving you exposure to. So आप कोई भी थीम पकड़ लो, right? Let's say अभी थोड़ा टॉपिकल है मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, ठीक है? सो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग थीम में अगर हम देखेंगे, जो जस्ट एज एन इंडिकेशन, capital goods, auto, healthcare, chemicals, all these sectors are sort of part of a manufacturing theme, and you are getting exposure to all these sectors through the large mid cap 250 index. ठीक है? आप capex भी देख लो. So capex में your infra, broader than capex also infra. So आपका oil and gas, power, metals mining, telecom, construction, all these kind of sectors come under the broad infra theme, and आपको सारे sectors का exposure मिल रहा है in the large mid cap 250. And पुराने भी आपके जो themes है about services, so you have financial services, IT, FMCG, or consumption. So almost any theme that is relevant for India that still has room to grow or to develop further, you are getting exposure in large mid cap 250 broadly, right? And एक और point है is that इस एक ही index में आपको 20 sector का exposure मिल रहा है. So that's what just want to re-emphasize कि the growth story in India is much more broad than it was in the 2010s. This decade has been much more depth in terms of where the growth is coming from, that can be expected to last, thanks to government reforms, etc. So to capture this wide growth, it's important to have a very broad wide index, and that is what large mid cap 250 index is. With 20 sectors in one index, it is giving you exposure to both multiple sectors and also different kinds of themes in a single product. So that's kind of just more about the index, the methodology, and now also why, what all are you getting exposure to in a single product. As you can see, it's very broad. Okay, so next section on the performance. ठीक है, so this is the third section. So यहाँ पे हमें दिखाई दे रहा है कि the performance of this index has been quite strong across different time zones, different horizons. So 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, even 10 year, right? काफी अच्छा performance रहा है. And one more point I'd like to make on this slide is कि this slide and on the next few slides also आप एक चीज notice करेंगे, and ये है कि large mid cap 250 index का return almost always lies somewhere between large cap index and mid cap index के return के बीच में, right? वो that makes sense because we've said that large mid cap is nothing but a 50-50 combo of both the individual indices. So just wanted to highlight this so that you also have a frame of reference, right? कि इनका return से यहाँ पे आप देखोगे 10 years में 17.5% CAGR for large mid cap 250. So this return is more than large cap, less than mid cap. तो यही pattern हमको अगले slides पे भी दिखाई देगा. This slide is showing the performance by financial year. So it's similar to the slide I had shown earlier कि winners keep changing. आपको यहाँ पे भी दिखाई दे रहा होगा कि the 1 year large cap does well, 1 year mid cap does well, फिर से reverse होता है. So it's not consistent कि एक ही index दूसरे index को हमेशा outperform कर रहा है. That is again why the diversified large mid cap 250 index makes sense, because as an investor it also solves that problem for you of deciding कि कहाँ पे allocation करूँ इस साल, should I put it to large, should I put it to mid. यहाँ पे बहुत simple है, आपको दोनों segments में exposure मिल रहा है and the amount is set at 50-50. Last slide on performance. So this is the rolling return section. So this gives an idea of how consistent the returns are over different time frame, एंड यहाँ पे भी वही सेम पैटर्न दिख रहा है कि रोलिंग रिटर्न्स आर लार्ज मिड कैप इंडेक्स के रोलिंग रिटर्न्स आर इन बिटवीन द लार्ज एंड द मिड कैप इंडिविजुअल इंडिसेस. ठीक है. सो इस स्लाइड में क्या टेकअवेज है? One is that suppose you are a large cap investor, आपका portfolio is predominantly large cap, right? बट आपको थोड़ा मिड कैप का ग्रोथ पोटेंशियल का भी फायदा उठाना है. सो देन लार्ज मिड कैप 250 इंडेक्स कुड मेक सेंस टू यू. सो फॉर एग्जांपल 1 year रोलिंग रिटर्न फॉर जस्ट द लार्ज कैप इंडेक्स 17.1%. बट अगर आप लार्ज एंड मिड को कंबाइन करोगे, राइट, एज द 250 इंडेक्स डज, दैट रिटर्न इज अप टू दैट एवरेज रिटर्न इज नाउ अप टू 19.4%. सो थोड़ा आपका वॉलिटिलिटी भी बढ़ेगा, but by adding mid caps in the long run, your pure large cap investor is able to get higher returns through large mid cap 250. ठीक है. नाउ इमेजिन द अदर केस कि आपका पोर्टफोलियो अभी बहुत मिड कैप हैवी है, राइट? सो उसमें यू कैन सी हियर कि जनरली, बिकॉज लाइक आई सेड अर्लियर, मिड कैप का ग्रोथ पोटेंशियल है, बट ऑल्सो वॉलिटिलिटी, उसके साथ साथ वॉलिटिलिटी, हायर वॉलिटिलिटी भी आता है. If you look here, mid cap index has the highest standard deviation, right? So if you are a investor with lot of mid cap exposure और आपको थोड़ा सा volatility कम करना है, then again you can consider large mid cap 250. Why? Because Nifty large cap index individually उसका volatility is lower than mid caps. So when you combine the two, you end up with a volatility which is lower than mid cap but higher than large cap. So यहाँ पे let's say कि again आपका मिड कैप हैवी पोर्टफोलियो है, ऑन अ 5 year बेसिस स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन इज ऑलमोस्ट 6.9% ऑफ द रोलिंग रिटर्न्स, बट लार्ज मिड कैप का स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन इज 5.6. सो अगेन it really depends on what your perspective is. You could be large cap, looking for a little bit more growth potential, so this index could make sense. Or you could be a mid cap investor, have lot of exposure there, be a little worried about volatility, तो फिर भी you can get exposure to large mid cap 250 and get little bit lower volatility. So that is the the performance slides covered. So I hope this helps to give you a sense कि historically इस index का क्या performance रहा है, what has the consistency been, and how have the rolling returns also evolved through time. Okay. So I think now we can just summarize, what are the main points. So what are the drivers, to consider investing in this NFO. So first is key, because of the exposure to 250 stocks, 20 sectors, you are getting, it's a very efficient way to participate in the India growth story. So that's the first point, right? Second is कि you are getting exposure to, आपको एक ही product के through large and mid cap exposure मिल रहा है. So it's that way again simple. You don't have to buy multiple funds and track. अगर आपको you believe कि yes, large caps are giving you that relative stability, mid cap is giving you that growth potential, then आप एक ही product में उसको ले सकते हैं, and you can keep things simple for yourself, right? And on that same point, now that आपको एक ही product में large mid मिल रहा है, you're also getting it in a very balanced 50-50 way, which is being reset quarterly. So long term में you can maintain this allocation very easily. Nothing to be done at your end as an investor, because Sara rebalancing is handled by our fund manager at the end of the quarter, and in a tax efficient manner as well. So you're getting the exposure to large and mid in a very sort of balanced allocation, and the rebalancing, maintaining that allocation is effortless from the investor's point of view. It's also tax efficient, right? So now that we've again understood why invest, we can think of who can invest in such a product. So इस प्रोडक्ट का अपील काफी ब्रॉड है, राइट? बिकॉज व्हाट इट्स डूइंग इज दैट इट्स अ सिंपल एंड इफेक्टिव solution to create wealth, right? Because like for many times I've mentioned, large mid growth story सब आपको एक ही product में मिल रहा है, multiple sectors, themes. So anyone who's just looking for a simple way कि you believe in the long term potential of India, looking to capture that growth story, then you can consider this product. So for example, sometimes within this category you may have first time or new investors. They may be getting थोड़ा सा लोग कंफ्यूज हो जाते हैं, इतने सारे कैटेगरीज हैं, अब मैं किस में डालूं, स्मॉल चल रहा है, मिड चल रहा है, लार्ज कैचअप करेगा. If you want to just simplify matlab your decision making, this is a very good product for you, because as and when India grows, the index should also hopefully benefit for the reasons we have described, right? So that way, broad appeal, but especially so if you are a first time investor and getting little confused, this is a simple product for the long term for you. Second is, as I मतलब मैंने थोड़ी देर पहले भी mention किया था, if your portfolio is very at the moment large cap heavy, and seeing this you feel कि I also want mid caps growth potential, then you can consider large mid cap 250, because you'll get about 50% exposure to mid caps, right? And lastly, again, just as an example, अगर आप mid cap investor हो, थोड़ा बहुत आपका portfolio obviously has done very well, you're a little worried about high volatility, right? So then you can also consider large mid cap 250, because you will be diversifying your mid cap exposure with large caps, and by doing that, overall आपका volatility थोड़ा सा कम हो जाएगा. So those are some ideas on who this kind of product could be suitable for. But at its simplest, I'm repeating again, it has broad appeal, because it's just a simple way to do long term wealth creation by participating in the Indian growth story. Okay. One just few quick minutes on why invest with HDFC AMC. So few reasons. One is that we have been one of the oldest passive managers in the industry. So our first index funds were launched all the way back in 2002, which means we have almost 20 years of plus of experience in managing passive products. All that experience, being in the market for so many years, has allowed us to refine our internal processes. So the result of this experience is that our tracking errors, tracking differences, overall our ability to track the benchmark efficiently is very good, right? So that's one point to consider. Second is that along with having very good tracking error, tracking differences, second point is that we are also very often in several categories, we have some of the largest funds. That's a function of our experience, the time we've been in the market, and the investor confidence in us. And lastly, would also like to highlight that we have a very wide product range. We have currently 21 index funds. This one would be the 22nd. So we are quite excited that this this NFO will increase and make our product range even more sort of interesting and compelling for investors. Okay, so just very quickly, this is just giving you some basic fun facts about the NFO. एक just I think इस slide पे सबसे important चीज है कि the minimum amount to invest is ₹100 and any amount thereafter. तो अगर आपको छोटे amount से भी शुरू करना है, that's not a problem. That is in terms of lump sum. You should also note कि through the NFO and after, SIP is also possible. So during the NFO आप या lump sum कर सकते हैं या तो SIP, and similarly once the NFO reopens for daily subscription redemption, you can add more or sort of do an SIP then as well. So this is just the riskometer, and finally this is the disclaimer of our presentation. So Diwakar ji, I think from my side I'm done. So now would
Yeah.
be Hanji, happy to take any questions.
Yeah, such a great insight, Shikhar. So I think you have covered most of the things. सारी चीजें आपने बड़ी अच्छे से कवर किया हुआ है यहाँ पे. So even Even now, I would request all the participants, अगर आपके पास कोई question है, if you want to ask now on this particular scheme, so you can just put it in the chat box. We'll take the questions from there and ask Shikhar for this. Shikhar, I think what might take away from this particular presentation is like यहाँ पे जो rebalancing की बात आपने की थी, wherein the tax liability will not go to the customer. I think that is one of the biggest advantage. So if you can just quickly, if you can just go through the same again,
Sure,
wherein
sure.
customer will get to understand कि क्या exactly and what exactly the benefit is.
ठीक है, ठीक है। सो सी व्हाट आई वाज सेइंग ऑन दिस पॉइंट इज कि अज्यूम करो कि आप यू लाइक द कॉन्सेप्ट, यू लाइक दिस आइडिया कि यू वांट एक्सपोजर टू बोथ लार्ज एंड मिड, एंड यू आल्सो लाइक द फैक्ट कि 50-50 का एक्सपोजर मिल रहा है, राइट? बट एज एन इंडिविजुअल इन्वेस्टर, इफ यू ट्राई टू डू दिस योरसेल्फ, राइट, मतलब कि आप एक लार्ज कैप फंड और अलग से एक मिड कैप फंड लोगे, 50-50 वेट दोगे, एज एंड व्हेन यू मेक मनी ऑन वन साइड, राइट, तो वो 50-50 का वेट बदलेगा। सो इन द एग्जांपल आई हैड गिवन, आपने 50-50 से स्टार्ट किया, मिड कैप इंडेक्स और भी रैली कर गया, राइट? सो नाउ योर वेटेज बिटवीन लार्ज एंड मिड हैज शिफ्टेड 45-55। उसको अगर आप, राइट, एज द इंडिविजुअल इन्वेस्टर फिर से 50-50 करोगे, दैट मीन्स कि आप मिड कैप बेचोगे, लार्ज कैप खरीदोगे, राइट? Two problems. One is ki you have to sort of keep a track of this, right? Which every investor may not have the time or expertise to do. ठीक है? Second problem is कि जब आप mid cap index को बेचोगे, right? Since you have actually made money on it, it's possible कि it's likely कि you will have to pay capital gains tax on it, right? So आपने 55 बेच के, वो ₹5 के साथ you rebalanced it and bought large cap, but note कि आपने you will likely pay tax on that profit you have made as well. Okay, so this is a bit of an issue if you were to do it yourself, right? दो फंड लेके हर क्वार्टर, मान लो आपके पास वो बैंडविड्थ भी है, but it's likely कि you will be facing tax liabilities over the long run in the form of capital gains, right? ऑन द अदर हैंड, अगर आप इस फंड में इन्वेस्ट करोगे, द weightage of 50-50 between large and mid, it's reset every quarter, and that rebalancing is done at the scheme level itself. So that means our fund manager at the end of every quarter, in line with the index methodology, resets the weights back to 50-50. So जब fund manager through the fund ये rebalancing कर रहे होते हैं, right, selling mid caps to buy large caps or vice versa, जब वो करते हैं, on that there is no tax liability either for the fund or the investor, right? There is tax liability when you redeem the fund at the investor level, but तब तक all these rebalances, right? So मान लो आपने 20 साल के लिए ये fund hold किया है, all those, there are almost 80 quarters, right? For 80 quarters, जब भी rebalancing होगा, it will be happening at the fund level. There is no tax liability for the investor. So that's why it's a very good product for buy and hold, because आपको balance मिल रहा है 50-50, but and that balance is being maintained in a tax efficient manner. So that was the point of this slide.
Yeah. So Shikhar, इसमें rebalancing would be quarterly, if I'm not
Quarterly,
wrong.
correct.
Every quarter, the rebalancing would be done, and definitely, if it is large cap is high, then it will be reduced to 50%, and if mid cap is high, then it will be reduced to 50%. So I
Correct.
think this is a good thing. Tax liability भी customers की बच रही है, and साथ ही साथ growth potential भी है.
Exactly.
Done. So इसमें Shikhar, if you can just show the slide, one of the participant would like to see the slide wherein top 10 stocks जो हमने दिखाए हैं, एक बार
हाँ
आप
जी।
वो भी, yeah. So for the investors, like these are the stocks, top 10 stocks, which you can see over here, HDFC Bank, Reliance. So these are the stocks which you wanted to see. Anything to discuss on this slide, Shikhar?
I don't think anything in particular. Just एक चीज आप देख सकते हो कि see, because you are taking large mid और 50-50 कर रहे हो, some of the top 10 constituents is 22.5% weight. Whereas if you
Hmm.
look at some of the other indices like a Nifty 50 or so, just HDFC and Reliance together will be around that much. So that's what the point I was making, कि this is a more diversified index, कि it's not like कि just one or two names are dominating. You're getting, आपको 250 stocks के across diversification मिल रहा है, and 20 sectors के across भी diversification मिल रहा है. So it's a very broad product is the takeaway.
यस 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 अनदर थिंग सो इसमें एक और चीज थी शिखर इफ यू कैन जस्ट गिव idea on the so you have covered that there is no exit load buying selling में कोई इसमें exit load नहीं है
Correct.
entry exit load nothing is there
Correct.
expense the investor wanted to know about expense roughly what it would be so
ठीक है.
if you can just tell us about
Correct.
that.
Correct, correct. So expense, see, it will be finalized after the NFO, but very roughly, indicatively, the expense would be around somewhere around between 25 to 30 basis points, maybe closer to 28 or so. Again, very indicative, could be little higher, could be little lower. That's on the direct side. And then on the regular side, it would be around 75 to 80 bips. So 0.75 to 0.8%, very roughly, just
Okay,
indication.
understood. So Shikhar there is a question from the participant like कि NFO में इन्वेस्ट करना और जब
Hmm.
ये ऑलरेडी मार्केट में जब आ जाएगा तब इन्वेस्ट
Hmm.
करना सो दोनों में क्या डिफरेंस होगा मतलब एज अ कस्टमर इफ आई वांट टू इन्वेस्ट नाउ और इफ आई वांट
Hmm.
टू इन्वेस्ट लेटर सो व्हाट डिफरेंस विल बी देयर.
So there's no real difference in that sense. It's just a question of key on the date of allotment, right? For the NFO, where is the market and where would the market be after that? So अगर आपको लग रहा है कि अभी market और भी बढ़ेगा, so then if you put it in the NFO, then you will get an allocation earlier, or जब allotment होता है फिर उसके 3-4 दिन बाद ही reopen होता है. So if you want to get a little earlier allocation, then you can do the NFO. इफ नॉट, फिर जब एनएफओ रीओपन होता है आप तब भी पैसे डाल सकते हो.
करेक्ट उस समय शायद एनएवी बढ़ी रही या घटी रही सो दैट इज द
करेक्ट.
दैट टाइम क्या एनएवी है आपको उस रेट पे बाय करना पड़ेगा.
एग्जैक्टली.
या सो शिखर अनदर थिंग इज लाइक जैसे मार्केट अभी ऑल टाइम हाई चल रहा है देयर आर
करेक्ट.
मैनी मैनी पीपल हु आर थिंकिंग दैट मार्केट इज ऑल टाइम हाई वेदर वी शुड इन्वेस्ट इन और नॉट सो
करेक्ट.
व्हाट वुड बी द time period wherein all the funds which will come in the NFO will be like deployed. So क्या टाइम फ्रेम रहता है.
सो सी, बिकॉज क्योंकि ये पैसिव फंड है, राइट, इसमें फंड मैनेजर बाय एंड लार्ज कैश कॉल्स नहीं लेते हैं. बिकॉज इफ ही टेक्स अ कैश कॉल, देन द ट्रैकिंग एरर कैन बिकम हाई, right? Because passive, unlike active, passive में it's very important कि you have to track the benchmark as closely. That means कि इंडेक्स में जो भी स्टॉक्स है, जो भी वेट्स है, फंड मैनेजर को उसी हिसाब से लेना है. So short answer to your question is कि they will likely allocate the amount ASAP. It will not be a situation कि वो 2-3 हफ्ते या एक महीने के अक्रॉस डिप्लॉय करेंगे. दे विल बी जैसे ही अलॉटमेंट होगा, दे विल बी डिप्लॉइंग वास्ट majority of it on that day, or plus minus a few days around that.
ग्रेट डन सो जैसा हमने सभी ने देखा है सो आई वुड लाइक टू लाइक अगेन सो इफ एनी क्वेश्चन एनी पार्टिसिपेंट वुड लाइक टू आस्क प्लीज write it in the chat box we'll take the question from there and in your like presentation Shikhar we have seen that कि always मतलब जो भी returns रहे हैं या फिर even risk reward ratio भी रहा है so it is always in between.
Correct.
So for diversification, can we consider this particular investment अगर if somebody wanted to diversify even मतलब earlier you have mentioned that कि अगर कोई diversification देखना चाह रहा है जहाँ पे portfolio जो है बहुत heavy है mid cap पे so this is the one thing which the customer can look at.
Correct, correct. Because of that large cap exposure, so it's like कि large caps give you the advantage of little bit lower volatility, right? So अगर आप mid and large को mix करोगे, तो that combination tends to have lower volatility than pure mid cap. That's what वो slide पे भी हमें यही दिखाई दे रहा है कि
Correct.
मिड कैप में 6 पॉइंट लाइक ओके फॉर 5, जस्ट जो जैसे एग्जांपल के था 6.9% फॉर प्योर मिड कैप. बट जब हम कंबाइन करते हैं, देन लार्ज मिड कैप का स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन ऑफ रोलिंग रिटर्न्स इज 5.6%, लेस देन प्योर मिड कैप.
Correct. So, Shikhar, I think we have covered all the questions over here, and I would like to ask my investors or participants that अगर आपको इस NFO में इन्वेस्ट करना है, so you can go to our HDFC Securities site, you can go to our application, wherein in new fund offer under mutual fund आपको ये particular scheme दिखेगी, wherein you can just click and invest. It's a very simple thing. Even after that, if you face any challenge, I would request you to get in touch with your relationship manager. Definitely, they'll help you to invest in this particular scheme. Scheme wise, if you'll see large cap, mid cap, दोनों में ही exposure है. Even if you want some more returns, mid cap is there. If you want stability, large cap is there. This is one of the good combination which we are like which came as an NFO. And yes, the weightage is 50-50, so equal participation in both the categories. So thank you, Shikhar, for giving us such a great insight. I think we have answered all the questions, and it is very clear to all the investors like what the NFO is.
Okay, so thank you,
Thank you, Shikhar.
Diwakar. Just 1 second. I just want to
Yeah,
once again mention, just play the disclaimer, and
sure, sure,
also
sure.
just once again mention that the NFO is closing on 4th of
4th of October,
October.
correct.
So that's next Friday. So just investors can keep that in mind, while they make their decision. Okay, so I'll just play the disclaimer once. Mutual
Yeah.
fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Shikhar. And thank you all the participants for taking out the time and you have let's gone through the NFO. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shikhar.
No problem. And you can reach out to us if you have any questions. We can try and answer them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.